1940, World War II was raging on over Europe, and although it would not be for another year before the United States would enter the war, over at the publishing offices of Timely Comics, Simon was creating his own American patriotic superhero. Joe came up with a sketch and named his creation Super American. He would later change the name to Captain America because he thought the name sounded better and that there were too many super characters in comics. With the approval of Martin Goodwin, Simon teamed up with his good friend Jack Kirby, and the two would launch a cultural icon that is still going strong today. In this episode of Tony's Comic Spotlight, we shine the spotlight on the first appearance of Captain America and his youthful sidekick Bucky Barnes in Captain America Comics issue number 1 from 1941. Story number 1. Meet Captain America, written by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. A short prologue outlines the young men of America joining the Army and the threat of the 5th columnists, Nazi spies hidden deep within the American forces. 2 5th columnists in American uniform blow up a local munitions factory that is supplying the local Army camp. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., 2 Army generals visit President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and inform him of the threat, noting that every command he makes is sent back to Germany and nothing can be kept secret, even amongst his closest aides. The president asks them what they intend to do. After jokingly recommending that they send a comic book hero like the Human Torch into the Army, he introduces them to J. Arthur Grover, the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who has a counter-sabotage plan. The men all change into civilian clothes and get into a car, where they are taken to an old curio shop. An old woman greets them armed with a gun. She informs them that the formula has been found, and it will not disappoint them this time. A man dressed in lab clothes greets them and ushers them into a viewing gallery of a secret lab, where a frail young man is attached to a machine, and the old woman tears off her mask, revealing X-13, one of Grover's best agents. A doctor injects the young man with a liquid, and he starts to grow until he is above the normal human physique. The doctor also notes that his intelligence and strength have increased. The doctor christens him Captain America and tells him that his duty is to protect the American shores from Nazi spies and saboteurs. Suddenly, one of the Army officials secretly working for the Gestapo pulls out a gun and shoots the doctor, Professor Reinstein. A second shot then obliterates the serum that gave Captain America his powers, meaning no more super soldiers can be created. He lets out a third shot, hitting Grover before Cap bursts through the glass and beats him into submission. The barely conscious spy stumbles into a large electrical device, shocking him to death. Now clad in a colorful red, white, and blue uniform, Captain America embarks on his mission of stopping Nazi plots, making him world famous as the press and public wonder, who is Captain America? Later, at the U.S. Army's Camp Lehigh, the camp mascot Bucky Barnes shows his friend Private Steve Rogers a news report of Cap's latest victory and says that he would love to meet him. That night, he walks in on Steve changing into Captain America's uniform, preparing for more exploits. Having made this discovery, Steve says that Bucky must keep his identity secret and asks if he would like to be his sidekick. They suit up and together run off to stop Nazi threats. Story number 2. Case number 2, written by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. Tickets are being sold for the performance of the psychics Sando and Omar for only 10 cents each. On stage, Sandar looks into the eyes of a dwarfed Omar. Sandar asks Omar what he thinks is to come, and his prediction of a terrible accident at Fort Bix is projected onto a crystal ball. At that very instant, Fort Bix is shaken by a terrific blast. Meanwhile, Steve and Bucky are reading about the psychics in the newspaper. Bucky thinks they are phony, and the two decide to visit the theater. Yet again, the weird performance is repeated while Steve and Bucky are in the audience. This time, Omar sees Hilltown Bridge collapsing. Steve and Bucky rush to prevent the disaster, but they are too late. The duo returns to the theater to find out how Sando and Omar knew about the disaster. Suddenly, a woman's shrill cry for help causes Captain America to whirl about. He follows the scream to Sando's dressing room. A couple of gunmen are holding Betsy Ross captured. Sando reveals that he is Von Krantz and his plan, a chain of disasters that will destroy the morale of the United States. Betsy Ross reveals that Omar is just a poor idiotic tool. as the battle begins. Von Krantz tries to bomb the place. However, Bucky throws the bomb out through a window, and the duo wins, and Betsy Ross wants to thank them, but Captain America only says goodnight and leaves. Story number 3 is called Captain America and the Soldier's Soup. It's basically a 2-page novel written entry. I'm not sure exactly who wrote the story because it's not mentioned in it, but the synopsis is as follows. Captain America is awoken when he doesn't hear the sentry go past his tent at night. He gets up to discover that 2 thugs have killed the sentry and are planning to poison the soup supply. Cap rushes into action and beats them into submission with the help of Bucky. As the camp is awoken to find the bodies, some soldiers swear they saw Cap jump out of the window. It is revealed that the sentry was only unconscious and is getting better. Story number 4, The Chessboard of Death, written by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. In a secluded section of town, Rathcone approaches a chessboard with chess pieces that resemble real people. He announces to his agents that Admiral Perkins is giving a lecture tonight, and tonight is the night that the Admiral must die. Meanwhile, Steve convinces a reluctant Bucky to attend the lecture. As the curtains part at the lecture, the audience is witness to the Admiral's dead body. A stunned Steve and Bucky change into their costumes to chase down the killer. When Bucky prowls through the darkened alleys, he is watched by a lurking killer, Number 5. As Number 5 and Bucky begin to fight, Captain America jumps in and saves Bucky. The agent refuses to talk, but Captain America convinces him to. At that moment, a bullet hits the Nazi agent. Number 5 slumps in death as Captain America wards off a deadly hail of bullets. Cap notices 3 men, but they can't catch them in time. The duo decides to go back to Camp Lehigh. Rathcone continues his chess game and plans for General Ellsworth's death. That same evening, Mike Duffy tells Steve and Bucky that they're on special duty at the General's hut. However, the duo finds him dead inside the hut. The next day, newspapers announce to the American public another brutal killing in the ranks of the nation's military command. Rathcone moves on to his next victims, Captain America and Bucky, by sending out Strangler and Herr Chameleon after them. Later, back at the camp, Strangler visits Bucky and fools him into thinking he could solve the killings. That night, Bucky quietly approaches a shabby building. He walks into a trap and sees Rathcone and the chessboard. Bucky tries to run, but Rathcone trips him. He waits to kill Bucky because he wants to kill Bucky and Cap at the same time. Finding a note from Bucky, Captain America finds Rathcone's hideout. A battle begins and Rathcone pulls a gun on him. The duo beats Rathcone and his gang. Captain America calls the FBI to report where the criminals are at. Major Fields tells Steve later that he wishes he knew who Captain America was. Story number 5, The Riddle of the Red Skull, written by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. A worried Steve and Bucky drop off Major Croy at his home, who has just received a card from the Red Skull. Major Croy believes no such person and quickly goes into his home. While reading, the Major gets a surprise visit from the Red Skull. With his wide, hypnotic eyes, the Red Skull gazes deep into the Major's eyes and tells him to look until you see death. Captain America hears the news and decides he wants to handle this case without Bucky. However, it's Bucky who accidentally discovers the Red Skull's headquarters. While standing out on the rooftops, one of the Red Skull's henchmen, Slug, finds Bucky. Slug brings him to the Red Skull, not knowing that it's Captain America's partner. Cap finds the headquarters himself and a fight breaks out. In the midst of the fray, the Red Skull departs through a secret exit. The duo decides to return to Camp Lehigh. The next day, George Maxson of the Maxson Aircraft Corporation comes in person to watch his new plane take an Army test. The plane catches on fire while in the air and crashes, killing the men on board. Steve is aghast when Maxson shows more remorse for the plane's failure than the dead crew members. Later, General Charles Manner goes home and gets a package from the Red Skull. As the General opens the package, the Red Skull appears in the room and kills him. Mildred Manner hears the struggle and, with a gun in her hand, rushes into the room. As the Red Skull smacks her down, he hears footsteps and, like an angry tornado, Captain America bursts into the room. Cap knocks the Red Skull's mask off and it shatters. It's revealed that it's George Maxson and he has been using hypodermic needles to kill his victims. Another fight breaks out and Maxson rolls over onto one of his own hypodermic needles. Bucky asks why Captain America didn't stop Maxson from rolling over. Cap says he's not talking about it and he calls the FBI to tell them that Maxson committed suicide. The FBI finds a note indicating that Maxson was working for Hitler. Story number 6, Murder Limited, written by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. In mortal guise as Mike Curie, Hurricane visits Coast City, the scene of a series of brutal killings. Hurricane seeks transportation and hops into a taxi. While the unsuspecting taxi driver keeps his eyes on the road ahead, Hurricane removes two silver wings from their concealment and attaches them to both sides of the taxi. Suddenly, the cab surges wildly ahead and is transformed into a veritable comet. The bewildered taxicab driver quickly drops him off. A shadowy figure bearing a gun appears behind Hurricane. Hurricane tells the henchman that he wants to see Piggy Peroni. At that moment, Piggy shows up and pulls a gun on the hero. Hurricane tells him that his name is Mike Curie and is looking for work. Piggy decides to let Hurricane work with Dum Dum, and together they are to knock off Tim O'Leary. As Mike Curie, he becomes enraged at Piggy's callous order and transforms into Hurricane. After the battle, Hurricane tells Piggy that his hands are dripped with mortal blood and his punishment awaiting him will never end. Meanwhile, in his office, Police Commissioner Reagan braves the bombardment of criticism pouring from the lips of impatient Prosecutor Nelson. Nelson demands to have Piggy in custody, and with a flash, Piggy storms into the room with wings. The two want Piggy to talk. The hero with the new information goes to Vanderpont Estate. He decides to crash the masquerade ball to see Paul Sedan. Paul Sedan appears as the devil at the ball with his henchman Trigger. Trigger doesn't realize his boss is really Hurricane's cousin Pluto. Pluto slips a lethal Mickey in the punch as Hurricane watches. Hurricane transforms into disguise as an angel, yet Pluto recognizes Hurricane through his disguise. The entire universe seems to explode with the impact of the two colossal figures. At the DA's office, Piggy has named Paul Sedan as the chief of the murder ring. Prosecutor Nelson loses no time in tracking down Paul's estate. They find Hurricane, but Pluto has vanished. However, Trigger Bates is dead. Hurricane says he must go, for he is weak. An instant later, Hurricane's blurry shape speeds past the officers and disappears from view, leaving the cops baffled. Story number 7. Stories from the Dark Age, written by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. In the prehistoric wilds of 50,000 BC, the last of the Shaggy Ones, Ak, has motion tucked to his side. The Shaggy One begins to tell a tale about the day two hairless ones were cast onto the shores by their tribesmen. The hairless ones were a couple named Fadion and Raya, who also had their infant child with them. As soon as they arrived onto the unknown land, Gola, the woolly horned, began a battle with Fadion. Sadly, the two died in a violent battle, leaving Raya alone with her child. Within moments, the scent of the blood brought the four-footed killer from the forest, Kag the lion wolf. Ak had witnessed the event and saved Raya and her child. He took them to a cave where he began to worship the two. Later, while Ak hunted for food, Gru the lion found the worship cave and kills Raya. Before dying, Ak reveals to Tuck that he was the baby that was brought to the shores. After hearing the tale, Tuck decides to leave his beloved rock country. On his journey, he runs into Gorax and they attack Tuck. However, Tanir saves Tuck from the Gorax and the two decide to travel together. Here's some trivia I thought I'd share with you in regards to Captain America Comics number 1. This was the first appearance of Cap's wedge shield. With issue number 2, he would get his traditional red, white, and blue disc shield. As portrayed in a sequence of Captain America the First Avenger, the cover of this issue featured Captain America punching Adolf Hitler, a scene that would already set the tone for why the character was created. A patriotic banner that would fight against the Nazis and would boost the morale of the soldiers and the rest of the American population. Bucky Barnes' character was based after creator Joe Simon's friend, a basketball player from his high school. The Red Skull that appears in this issue is not the same Red Skull that everybody is familiar with. The more infamous Red Skull is actually Johann Schmidt, who doesn't appear until Captain America Comics issue number 7. However, it has been since retconned that Schmidt was also operating behind the scenes in this issue. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode of Tony's Comic Spotlight, where we took a look at Captain America Comics number 1 from 1941. If you're enjoying the content on the channel, please give us a like and subscribe. I appreciate it. I'm working on my subscriber giveaway, my 100 subscriber giveaway, and I will be releasing details on what you could win and the rules this Sunday sometime during the day. So if y'all look out for that video. I will be sharing in the descriptions below this video some links for other YouTube creators who have done a really good job creating content, and they all deserve a like and a sub as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.